Carham hides her history well. Today, Carham is just a small rural hamlet with few inhabitants. But over the centuries, this has been a site of important religious establishments, of conferences of peace and of war, and of courts that have ruled over border disputes. Carham has also seen battles, carnage, and marching armies. Today, Carham holds a unique place on the border between England and Scotland, but there is little evidence to remind us of a turbulent past. Carham hides her history well. In the decades leading up to the Battle of Carham, Northumbria held the middle lands between the newly emerging nations of England and Scotland. In the year 1006, Malcolm II, King of Scots, raised an army, ventured south and besieged the town of Durham. But for the Scots, Durham, the final resting place of St Cuthbert, turned out to be a town too far, and Malcolm was defeated and driven back to the Highlands, lucky to escape with his life. The victor at Durham was Uhtred, son of Waltheof of Bamborough, and he was rewarded by being made Earl of all Northumbria. The threat from the north was now removed, at least for the time being, but in the event, the next threat came from the south. In 1016, England suffered an invasion by Canute, Prince of Denmark. Uhtred at first fought against Canute, but to no avail, and in that same year he surrendered, only to be ambushed and killed on the orders of Canute, a loss that was going to severely hamper the Northumbrians. By 1018, the new dynasty had resulted in strife and confusion in England, and had further weakened the far-flung outpost of Northumbria. This afforded Malcolm II, now allied to Owen the Bald, King of Strathclyde, Cumbria, ample reason and opportunity to attack Northumbria and perhaps avenge his earlier defeat at Durham. The approach of a combination of two armies, one from the north and a second from the west, once again put the northern reaches of Northumbria in grave danger. And Carham, with its links to Durham and St Cuthbert, was in the centre of this danger area. "1,000 years ago, there was no defined border. England and Scotland were both in the process of evolving into the nations we recognise today. In the year 975, King Edgar of England ceded Lothian to Kenneth, King of Scots. The details of this arrangement are uncertain, but they do have a direct bearing on the Carham and border story. The disused phone box was bought by the parish council for the princely sum of £1 and is now Carham's very own, very small visitor centre, a twin to nearby Brankston's Flodden phone box. There is information relating to Carham and border history, and the north-south and also east-west cultural and language similarities and differences of past years. The present parish church stands on or very close to the site of ancient religious establishments. The earliest dating back to St Cuthbert's Minster, which was founded in the 7th century and was later followed by an Augustinian priory. Inside St Cuthbert's parish church can be found 6 panels which tell the story of the church and of the momentous events of the Battle of Carham, which took place over 1,000 years ago. Behind the church can be found another board. This board marks Carham's unique position on the border. From this place, it is 500 yards due north to Scotland, 80 yards to the west, or 1 mile due south. It also shows the location of other border conflicts during the 500 or so years that followed the Battle of 1018. Many castles and towers are also marked. The quietly grazing cattle belie the fact that this field has seen a mighty battle. A battle that came to define the border between the two emerging nations of England and Scotland. The question has been asked, where was the battle fought? Carham or Wark? The only remaining evidence of Wark Castle is this granite outcrop on which it once stood. The castle is often used as proof that the battle was fought here at Wark. However, this Motte and Bailey castle has no relevance to the battle because construction did not start until more than 100 years after the Battle of Carham was fought. However, it did later become a major part of border defence, and this 16th century plan shows that at one time the castle encompassed most of the present-day village of Wark. The 1955 Ordnance Survey map shows the Battle of Carham fought here in 1018, about 3/4 of a mile to the east of the village of Wark and of Wark Castle. This is not consistent, however, because the later 1976 map, although it shows the battle fought here, marks a date of 1016. But the later 2000 edition of the map doesn't mark the battle here at all. It's vanished. But it does mark Battle Place just to the west of Wark. Two miles upstream from here in Coldstream, the course of the river was once very different. Recent work by Passmore and Waddington shows conclusively that 1,000 years ago the River Tweed ran much further to the south than it does today. The area where the river used to run is today known as Dry Tweed, but we still get reminded that this is a floodplain when river levels run high. What is today fertile arable land was once river or marsh and unusable for battle. If, as this evidence shows, the battle was not fought at Wark, then what is the case for Carham? 1,000 years ago, Carham was a much larger community than Walk, if Walk even existed then. The ecclesiastic importance and the Cuthbert connection make Carham a likely target. Although Cuthbert is remembered as a man of peace, the same did not always apply to all men of God, and the clergy, including bishops, were often involved in the prosecution of warfare. From the earliest times, the church had assets, riches and influence which were worth defending, but, by the same token, also ripe for attack and pillage. Carham was no exception to this rule. Many early battles were fought on or near river crossings, where a good defensive position could often be secured. An ancient drove road and Roman road intersect at Carham, giving easy access for both attackers from the north and west, and also for the defenders from the area between Tees and Tweed. Here, the ridge and furrow markings show that this land has been cultivated since ancient times, and there is visible evidence that suggests there may have been buildings here. This is a site begging for further detailed investigation. The next question is, in what year was the battle fought? We've seen from the Ordnance Survey maps that there are two possibilities for this date, 1016 and 1018. Now, writing in the 1940s, the renowned historian Sir Frank Stenton offers the opinion that the Battle of Carham was fought in 1016. But Simeon of Durham, a monk and chronicler writing in the early 1100s, states that 1018 is the correct date, and he offers evidence that a comet was seen for 30 days prior to the battle. To obtain definitive proof of the date of this comet, we contacted NASA, who, although medieval battles were not part of their usual research, directed us to Gary Cronk and his masterful work, Cometography, which is a comprehensive register of all comets seen since ancient times. There was only one possible comet, and this was recorded throughout Europe, India and Asia, and it was visible in August of 1018. And so this gives us ample evidence that the Battle of Carham was fought in or about September 1018. Uhtred, son of Waldulf, Earl of Northumbria, was a highly skilled and accomplished warrior, and he is often quoted as the commander of the Northumbrians. But there is a problem. Simeon, in his History of the Kings of England, states that Uhtred did indeed lead the Northumbrians at Carham, but elsewhere in the same volume, he categorically states that Uhtred was treacherously killed on the orders of Canute, and that this act took place before Easter, which was the 1st of April, 1016. If this is correct, then obviously Uhtred was not present at the battle in 1018. But Stenton argues that names are better remembered than dates, and whereas Stenton agrees that Uhtred was killed in 1016, he maintains that Uhtred was the commander at Carham. Therefore, the battle must have been fought in 1016 or before. But the evidence for the battle fought in 1018 is compelling, and Stenton's opinion may be discounted. The other possible leader for the Northumbrian is Uhtred's brother, Eadwulf, but he is not of the same metal as Uhtred, and he bears the sobriquet Cudel, meaning cuttlefish or coward. It certainly makes a better story for the Northumbrians to blame their defeat on a cowardly leader rather than Uhtred, a hero warrior. However, Eadwulf Cudel is by far the more likely and logical leader of the Northumbrians. There is no disagreement about the commanders of the attacking forces, Malcolm II, King of Scots, and Owen the Bald, King of Strathclyde. Their combined army was to prove disastrous for the Northumbrians. In the summer of 2018, to commemorate the 1000th anniversary of the battle, visitors came from far and wide to see a multitude of reenactors recreate village life and activities of 1,000 years ago, including crafts, cooking, and leatherworking. But the real purpose of the village camp was to support the warriors, and this included training of the youngsters in the formation of the shield wall and the tenacity of attack. Casualties amongst the instructors were heavy.
Go again. Ow! Stop it! There you go.
Suddenly, a spy is discovered in the camp. Quick and rough justice is the order of the day.
Wait! I've changed my mind.
Oh, we fought you, mate. Speak and fast. Why are you here?
But just in time, vital information is extracted.
My kings have formed an alliance, and they are coming to kill every one of you.
Given this warning, the reenactors prepare for battle. The reenactors first demonstrated the use of slingshot and arrow, the weapons that would have been used in the opening stages of battle. This was followed by individual displays of fighting with spears, a two-handed weapon of about 8 feet in length, easy to produce in numbers. The next display was close-quarter fighting using swords. Even basic swords were expensive to produce and were therefore valuable weapons. The most vicious-looking weapon on the battlefield was the axe. Both the standard battle axe and the long-handled Dane axe were displayed to great effect. The battle knife, or sax, was demonstrated with surgical and lethal precision. Armour was a matter simply of what you could afford, find, beg, borrow, or steal. The fundamental formation for both attack and defence was the shield wall. This relied on close formation, locked shields, courage, and noise. There is one final question. Did the Battle of Carham define the border between the two emerging nations of England and Scotland? Carham 1018 was the first major battle in what was to become 500 years of border conflict. After Carham, Lothian was lost to the Scots, and the River Tweed became the northern limit of Northumbria and of England. Following the Norman conquest of 1066, defensive castles were built on both sides of the River Tweed, including here at Berwick, which eventually became one of the most heavily fortified towns in Europe. A few miles upstream lies Norham Castle, founded by Ranulph Flambard, Bishop of Durham, and attacked many times by the Scots, before being finally taken just before the Battle of Flodden. Wark Castle suffered a similar fate. Roxburgh Castle, in the grounds of Flores Castle near Kelso, was attacked on many occasions before it was destroyed by the Scots to remove it as a target for the English. Commanding a strategic position overlooking much of the Tweed Valley, still stands the imposing Hume Castle. The Tweed had now become a definite border and a barrier between the two nations. There were many incursions across the Tweed from both north and south, but with the exception of Berwick, which has changed hands several times, for over 1,000 years the Tweed has marked the border as far upstream as Carham. Here the border leaves the Tweed and runs for about 30 miles to the south, and even somewhat to the east, across moorland and mountain, before it resumes its way westwards to the Solway Firth. This puts Carham in the unique position of being to the south, the east, and even to the north of the border with Scotland. Other battles fought within a day's march of Carham include Piperdean, Flodden, Yevering, Homeldon Hill, Nesbit Moor, Duns, Halidon Hill, and two at Alnwick. Berwick was also attacked on many occasions. Over the centuries, major battles and warfare diminished, but the borders remained lawless and defensive towers were built as refuge against the raids of the border reivers. Not until the 1700s did fine houses start to be built for comfort rather than defence. Although the remains of castles and towers are scattered throughout the border area, Carham remains enigmatic and has none. But this isolated hamlet has seen religious establishments, conferences of peace and of war, and savage conflict. Invading armies from both sides have crossed the river nearby, and Carham has been the place of courts to settle cross-border disputes. Today, the remains of ancient buildings are gone, and the scars of a varied and often troubled past have healed. Carham hides her history well. As the Carham project reached its final stages, we had the opportunity of some high-tech research. The Bernicia Studies Group offered to supervise a magnetometry survey of parts of Carham Home, which is the large field just to the east of the village. This required 2 teams of volunteers and would include training, setting up the survey and the use of the equipment. The first job was to set out a series of grids of 20-metre squares with the utmost accuracy over the area to be covered. Once this was done, each square had to be crisscrossed, accurately holding the gradiometer exactly over a marked line. Covering each square required the gradiometer to be carried at a steady pace for 800 metres. 2 areas of study were chosen, needing a total of 22 20-metre squares. The gradiometer collected and stored the data, which was later downloaded to a computer, and after a few hours of thinking time, it came up with a printout of the findings. The most prominent feature on the LiDAR, the rectangle in the middle of the field, indicated just 4 walls, with no divisions or internal features. This was probably some sort of corral for use during river crossings, and a track leading southwards from this point is along the line of an ancient drove road. The main area of the investigation was just to the north of the parish church, and here the magnetometry indicated a complex of stone buildings of various sizes, some with internal divisions. Also several smaller buildings or enclosures showed on the printout. This is the best evidence yet of the site of the Augustinian priory, which dates back to the early 12th century. In this same area, there were faint, almost ghostly markings which indicated the outlines of older, more ephemeral buildings. These almost certainly show the vestiges of timber structures, as would be expected of the original 7th century St Cuthbert Minster. The survey has shown that Carham had an important ecclesiastic presence which lasted for centuries. Carham was a place worth attacking, but perhaps more importantly, it was a place worth defending, which may help explain Carham's unique position on the border.